Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy Chamisha B'Shvat. You've enjoyed the fruit. In fact, I want to use the next few minutes to talk to you about the ideas of Chamisha B'Shvat. Chazal teach us that one of the signs of redemption of the Jewish people is that the land of Israel will produce its fruits in abundance. We have to have in mind that this was a barren country and that only over the last decade, so to speak, has it become bountiful because of the efforts and technology of the Jewish people invested here in the land of Israel, and that this agricultural revolution, Israel is famous for it. And in fact, it's been exported to many other places in the world. One of the ideas that was common in Western culture in the 19th century was that the world was going to run out of food. The Malthusian theory was that population growth would make it impossible to feed the human race on the face of the earth. And therefore, measures had to be taken to decrease human population. And part of the theory was that that's why diseases and wars always were necessary, so to speak, in order to thin out the general population, and that there would be food for those that survive. It is just an extension of the survival of the fittest theory, evolutionary theory, applied in biology and applied in the social world as well. The Torah doesn't mention any of this. The Torah does not warn us that we're going to run out of food. But the Torah does warn us of the fact that if people misbehave, then nature misbehaves as well. And that, so to speak, nature responds to human behavior. There will be rain, but there won't be rain. There will be bountiful crops, but there will be drought years and bad years as well. And the Torah wants us to look at this not narrowly, not in terms of natural cycles alone, but rather as reflections, so to speak, of divine will. The way people measure things, that's the way heaven measures it with us as well. So therefore, part of the basic idea of Torah and Judaism is gratitude towards food. Not only gratitude towards food, but to treat food with respect. In fact, to treat the very act of consuming food with respect. The Torah, the Talmud teaches us that one should eat seated at a table and not walking around standing. It's disrespectful. Now, there are circumstances where we have to eat standing. But generally speaking, food should be treated with respect, not as something that is inanimate, so to speak, and that we don't have to respond to it at all. And therefore you have, for instance, that food becomes a mitzvah by us. We're coming now in a few months to the holiday of Pesach. So al achilas matzah. Matzah is a mitzvah. Now the mitzvah is that we remember and everything that Pesach carries with it, but the basic mitzvah is to eat matzah. And therefore we have an entire lexicon of blessings, of brachot, that accompany food. We can't just eat. So for certain foods, we have to wash our hands beforehand. Every food, so to speak, has its own bracha. Today we made a bored trio apes. Perhaps some of us were able to have a new fruit that we had not had this year, so that we make a bracha shechionu. It all lends importance to food. And when the Torah wanted us to understand this, so we have the famous incident with which the Torah itself begins. Eating from the Eitz Hadas, or wanting to eat from the Eitz HaChaim. Eating was the Aveira. And we counteract that Aveira, so to speak, because we make eating a mitzvah. So then it depends what you eat. And there we have the whole Shulchan Aruch of Yeridea as to what to eat. And then the question is how to eat. So it is meant to remove from us the idea that we are purely animals. The animals eat. They eat to sustain life, and we eat to sustain life. But there's a difference, because our eating should have a higher purpose. It's to sustain life in a spiritual and not only physical sense. It's to make us better people. So the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah tells us that there's a Rosh Hashanah for eating, for trees. Today was the day, according to Beit Hillel. And therefore there are halachas regarding age of trees. You can't eat the fruit right away. You have to wait a certain number of years. There are questions of giving the tithe, all of which the Rabbanim added that because the rabbis wanted to give it a sense of importance, a sense of holiness. And in the long, dark night of the exile of the Jewish people, in the middle of the winters of Eastern Europe, there came a day that was a shaft of light, an encouragement of holiness. And Jews endeavored to get a fruit. I remember, I'm sure many of you too do as well, that at least in Chicago in my youth, the only fruit that was commemorative of Tu B'Shvat was something that was called bokser, which is the carob, came from the carob tree. Now, if you have fresh bokser, fresh carob, so it is digestible. But the boxer that we used to have was absolutely as hard as wood. It was like eating wood. And yet we all ate it because somehow we felt that boxer was connected with the land of Israel. And the land of Israel is connected with eternity. And that it's a new year for the trees. So it's a new year for us as well. It's a renewal of our spirit. And even though it may be in the dead of winter, we're giving respect to eating. Respect to eating brings us to Pesach. It brings us to every day, the Jewish home. Chazal emphasized that over and over again. So we have an entire Masechta, the first Masechta in Zorim called Brachot, which blessings to make. And then you have to have a blessing afterwards to thank heaven for the bounty that we have had and the food that we have eaten. All of this is to raise in our eyes and in our hearts the importance and the holiness of food. So originally in the Garden of Eden, Mikol eitz hagan ochel tochel. Food was not a problem. You could eat from every tree except from one, which is naturally the one that he wanted to eat from. And that brought about the difficulties that civilization has one long litany of difficulties since the Garden of Eden. And the Rebbeinu Shalom said, "Kotz v'dardar tatzmiach." It's not easy to get food. The earth is fickle. Weather is certainly fickle. This year we're experiencing, Baruch Hashem, nice wet winter. Kinneret is almost full. But all of us remember a few years ago that Kinneret was 4 meters below the level. You don't have water. And the ability to grow everything in this country. Such a strange climate that seemingly everything grows here. So when I grew up, nobody knew what a kiwi was, but now in Israel, we all have kiwis. And Israel, I remember when I first came, you couldn't get a banana here. And now everybody grows bananas, grows pineapple. And the bounty that exists. The problem is on the other side of the equation. Obesity is a greater problem than malnutrition. So all of that has to be seen in the perspective of what the Torah wants from us. And the Torah wants us to appreciate nature. It wants us to guard it. You're not allowed to destroy trees. Ki odam eitz hasodeh. It's like destroying a human being. So there are times that we have to cut down trees. But there are halachas regarding it. It's not simply a matter of whim. And the Torah also provides that we have to plant trees. One of the great things about us here in Eretz Yisrael is that all the trees that we see have been planted over the last century. The country was practically bereft of trees in the First World War. Whatever trees were left, the Turks cut down to build fortifications. And now we have forests, and we have orchards. We have all sorts of beautiful things to look at and appreciate, and it has an effect upon our climate and upon our nature. These are all blessings that, like all blessings, we take for granted. We only, God forbid, appreciate them in their absence. So this day, Chamish Osir B'Shvat, came to reinforce all of these ideas for us. Came to remind us of the world that we live in, of the journey that we have taken, and of how we should appreciate and deal with food. We have halacha bal tashlis, don't throw out things. Now in Israel, I don't know about now because of the corona, but for a number of years, there were organizations that the restaurants and the caterers gave them the leftover food and they were able to distribute it. Before, it used to go in the garbage. Food is not meant for the garbage. It's meant to be taken seriously. It has its own Rosh Hashanah. It has its own Yom Noraim. It has its own glory. And I think we've all graduated from Buxer. Delicious dates and other fruit and pomegranate, fruits that the Torah mentions that Eretz Yisrael is famous for and is praised for. So today we had a chance to at least think about it for a minute. Not just to consume it, but to appreciate it. To see that it's part of our existence. Part of the gifts that the Lord has bestowed upon us. And if we continue to see it in that vein, so then this Rosh Hashanah Lilonos, this new year that began today for the trees, God willing, will also mark a new beginning for us as well. And that we will hear good news and everyone will be healthy and well and prosperous and be able to eat from the fruit of the land. Next week, we're going to start a little later, 4:35. So please remember that. 6 o'clock, we have the Parsha Shiur, and Saturday night at 8 o'clock, we continue with the lecture series. Stay well, everyone, and thank you for listening, and Shabbat Shalom.